From KCBS Radio in San Francisco, I'm Matt Pittman, and this is Bay Current for Friday, January 14th. As school districts across the Bay and the U.S. are facing extreme challenges amid the Omicron surge of the pandemic, Oakland schools are feeling the pain acutely. Last Friday, classes were canceled as teachers at 12 schools in the Oakland Unified School District staged a teacher sick-out. Yesterday, Thursday, many students participated in their own sick-out, demanding better masks like KN95s. Today, you'll hear from two teachers with the Oakland Unified School District and hear about their greatest challenges and concerns and what it's been like in the classroom as Omicron rages.
My name is Julie Mendoza, and I teach at Roosevelt Middle School. I teach 7th grade humanities.
My colleague Mallory Samara sat down with Julie.
Teaching during the pandemic, right? What's the top line concern among teachers and staff at your school right now?
Well, for context, in a lot of ways before the pandemic, schools in East Oakland are already in need of more counselors and teachers and nurses. And the pandemic really just compounded all of these issues into a crisis, into an emergency situation every day. So what the biggest issue is, I think, right now is safety, staff safety, student safety, and our attendance has been so low for students, and I think some of the reasons are COVID related, and I think that a lot of students are being kept home in fear of their safety. It's really frustrating to receive emails like from the district claiming that they're doing enough and that enough support is being provided or that masks are on their way. Because what does that really mean when today there are 4 classes in the auditorium with no instructor because there aren't enough substitutes to cover the amount of teachers that are out that day because of COVID? Or when on the day that we have our biweekly PCR testing, there are 8 positive cases in a single class. Or when 4 front office staff are out and 1 person is responsible for sending symptomatic students home, calling parents when their student has tested positive, and explaining the quarantine guidelines to them at a school that represents over 20 different languages. And so I think that we are deeply understaffed. We need more support, more boots on the ground. We need more funding for proper PPE. And we need more substitutes. And this week has really made it clear that we need a defined metric that triggers a school closure if there are not enough adults in the building to keep students on campus safe. There are parts of the school that remain unsupervised because there are not enough adults present.
What has it been like since returning from holiday break? In the last, I guess it's been 2 weeks now, right? Since school has supposed to have been going on. How has that been since then?
Returning from winter break, there have been a lot of student absences. So this week, we had, classes had between 25 to 50% of their class absent. And this is challenging for a lot of reasons. This means that whatever lesson that you teach that day, 25 to 50% of your class is being left behind. And if they're quarantining for 5 to 10 days, then they're missing even more instruction. And it's one thing if it's one student who, when they return, you can provide extra support for, you can have them come during office hours, you can have them make up assignments. But when it's like 25 to 50% of your class, it's guaranteed that students are going to fall through the cracks and be left behind academically at a school where many students are already struggling academically.
What is the biggest daily in-classroom challenge that you've faced?
Something that is really concerning that's been happening since returning from break is students who are symptomatic coming to school and having to be the one to make the call and send that student home for the safety of the other students. There have been also instances when students that are supposed to be quarantining return to class. And so you have to check the quarantine list and hope that it's updated and accurate. And sometimes that student doesn't get, flagged until later on in the day. I think students also, who have experienced a lot of their teachers being absent and having to have multiple classes throughout their day in a library or in an auditorium without an instructor is really impacting their mental health. And just seeing how sparse their classrooms are creates this ominous tone in the room, like there's an elephant in the room. And so it was really important for us to have conversations and discussions about what was happening with our students. And so part of organizing the sick out was to create slide decks that teachers could use to have these conversations with students and see, why did they think attendance was low? Why did they think everybody in the building was getting tested? What do they think needs to happen at school to make students feel safe enough to return? And what power do they have in demanding those safety measures and making sure they're met?
Can you relate to the reasons behind a student-organized sick out?
I think that the OUSD student demands are completely aligned with the teacher demands. We know that for this particular variant, which is 3 times as contagious as previous variants, there is a specific type of PPE required in order to prevent transmission. I think students are aware of that. We're aware of that. If, when you have biweekly testing, you're getting 8 positive cases in a single classroom, that is an indication that testing needs to be happening more frequently because there's community spread. And I'll say that one thing that teachers may be wanting that students, that are not on the list of student demands are just better communication from our school leaders and from our district about COVID protocols. Because they keep changing and oftentimes they conflict with each other. And it's difficult to communicate with our families when we ourselves are unclear how to follow these protocols, especially in regards to testing, because, whether or not a rapid test or PCR test is good enough to return seems like it's different for students than it is for teachers. And we've also experienced teachers who have had up to 5 close contact notifications who were denied PCR testing on their own campus because they were asymptomatic. And those experiences really are what I think are fueling the need for these demands.
Up next, another teacher from Roosevelt Middle School, Seb Beltran-Moeller, who teaches 6th grade humanities. So, Mr. Beltran, this is your first year as a full-time teacher with your own classroom, right?
Yeah.
So
first year.
When I think about, I was saying, man, it would just, what a challenge it would be to be a student in these times. This is probably not what you had in mind when you got out of college and said, hey, I'm going to go teach.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, finishing up college, just being online, going back into in-person classes was a good breath of fresh air, but just everything's just constantly changing. So it's really hard to follow up with all the updates and just, be on top of every little change and update. But, what's really inspiring is just how like adaptable the kids are and how willing they are to be like flexible with these situations and really just like make the most of it. Even if we have like half the kids in our classes, like they're still putting in like as much effort as any other time. So they're aware of what's going on. It's not disrupting like their motivation, at least yet, but see how long this thing, how long it'll last for. But that's it. That part has been like really inspiring, just seeing like their willingness and like inner motivation to put forth that effort.
Is it frustrating that there aren't better plans in place, given that this isn't new, right? Like we've had the better part of 2 years to come up with the best strategies, the best ways to make sure that there were stockpiles of PPE, KN95 masks or N95 masks, or stockpiles of rapid tests, because it just feels like we're constantly scrambling.
Yeah, it definitely is like a very like deja vu moment, just sort of like stuck in the middle and just like kind of looking all around, like what's going on. And as far as like, what are we going to do? Like, I don't know. And it is sort of like demoralizing to think like all this progress that like the kids have made, like might have to suffer as a result of like going back to online learning. But, the kids are kind of aware, like, yeah, like I asked them like, and they're like, yeah, we'll probably just go back to online learning. But I can't give them a clear answer if we're gonna. And that's sort of like frustrating as far as like how I can't be like super real with them, or like maybe that is part of the reality of just like how uncertain it is, but I can't just be as straight up as like, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. As a teacher, you're supposed to be, not the be all end all, but like, the students go to you for like answers, and, their families do too. So it's just like, it's tough, going to them and just like, I don't know, but like, I'll just tell you the next thing I can. It is a very day by day, hour by hour sort of process.
What has the classroom experience been like in terms of the challenges that you faced, especially since you've returned since the holiday break on the 3rd, right? Is it the lack of PPE, things like effective masks? Is it the inability to distance? What is it?
So I feel like just being in the classroom, right? Half the kids are there. So usually classes are up to like 30 kids usually. And now they're 15, 14 kids, half or less than half. Right. And same with the staff, right? Staff is really running thin. Some kids are being in the auditorium, multiple classes at a time in the auditorium, subs, finding subs already is a tough thing, but even especially with this, with so many teachers out, it's just, people are really stretched thin. And the PPE definitely, that's, a key demand of this whole sick out is just like asking for the KN95 masks for students and staff. Right. So in, that those materials are just like really necessary, but it's with this whole thing, same with like the rapid testing, right? It's recommended, but how much resources are there, right? Like how much availability is there? So it's like kind of these contradicting messages, and just like really just in terms of like the accessibility and like availability of, what's being said to deal with this. But spread out distancing, kids are still eating in cafeteria. So trying to find ways where they can eat outside is another demand. And, another challenge is that's going to come with this is just how are we going to reintegrate those kids who have been gone for 2 weeks, those kids who have been gone for a week and a half. Catching them up to speed, especially for something like math, where you have to know, you learn one thing and build on that, lesson by lesson. English is maybe a little bit different, because you can kind of, mess around with that and, read a little bit, but like,
you're able to go at your own pace a lot more than, because math, you're pretty much on the same wavelength for the entire class.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Interesting.
So just catching kids up is going to be another thing. Who knows if we're going to go back to online or in person, but just catching those kids up who have missed since coming back on the 3rd. So some kids have been, chronically absent since the 3rd, haven't come back. And just dealing with, the constant flooding of emails, close contact emails, things like that. Like you've been exposed, that kind of thing. And then just, next day, another kid's absent, next day, another kid's absent.
Yeah.
It's just so multi-layered as far as like what's being affected and what like environments.
What has that experience been like, just the uncertainty and knowing that you could be one close contact away from having your own COVID scare?
It's just a weird sort of situation. Like, I don't want to use the phrase like tough it out, but it's like, that's just kind of what we're doing. It's just like The Last of Us, showing up, making the most of it kind of deal. It's just like, when kids are lining up on the ramp and it's like, a minute left to class before the bell rings for class. And it's just like, there's less than 15 kids. And it's looking really grim, guys, like, let's just make the most of it. And it's just getting kind of grim, and just got to really dig in deep and try to like encourage them the best we can. Like, half of us are here, less than half, but like, let's just make the most of what we can, and just stay safe. And luckily I have some leftover rapid tests, but even those, there's so much like uncertainty over, and it's just like, if you want one, like, hit me up after class, like I'll give you one, but it's just like the messages are contradicting. It's like they give them out, but do they really work? Kind of, so it's just,
so when you say you have extra rapid tests, I mean the supply that you were given as a teacher, or these your personal supply that you're giving?
This is from the school, from the district.
Okay. So you've mentioned several times, like, contradicting or conflicting messages. And I think that we all kind of feel that way to a certain extent, because the CDC's they've been dinged a little bit, especially recently, like, wait, 10 days or 5 days? Like,
yeah.
So only medical masks now, or can, we get away with, cloth masks like we've been wearing for 2 years? I understand all of that, but are you getting the support you need in terms of the right information you need, whether that be from your union or from the school district? Do you feel like you're getting everything that you need to make the best decisions for yourself and your students every day?
Yeah, I think the communication is there, but like, there's also so much like uncertainty that we can only get so much info. Like, we don't know if we're going to go online, or like what the protocols are going to be for going online, or like what the percentage of staff absent needs to be for us to close down the school, like things like that. It's just like so uncertain. But the communication about like who I've been in close contact with, that kind of thing, that's been pretty like prompt and pretty up to date. But as far as like the mask distribution, that's pretty rough too. Like, we need the KN95 masks, and like, just don't have them, or like, we're told we have them, but also kind of got some contradicting messages of like how to pick them up, where to go, like, because we're getting a lot of things, and it's just like, you gotta really be like on top of everything as far as like how to streamline it and like distribute things to like everybody. So it's really just those sort of things should be like really clearly communicated. And that's not like, it's not really necessarily the fault of like the admin or the fault of the school district or the school board or anything like that. But it's just like, there has to be like that streamlined, clear communication. Like, are there going to be masks? Is it only for the staff? Is it for the students as well? Like, it's tough because, things are getting updated, and, we're getting, supplies, but it's just like kind of figuring out like the logistics of how to distribute, I feel.
Thank you again to Seb and to Julie. And many thanks to my colleague Mallory Samara for co-producing today's episode. New episodes of Bay Current are out every weekday, and we'd love to be part of your daily routine. Please subscribe to the Bay Current podcast on the Odyssey app, Apple Podcasts, or just about anywhere you listen to podcasts. And every episode is on the KCBS Radio YouTube page. There's a link in the show notes. That's it for today's Bay Current. I'm Matt Pittman. We'll chat with you again tomorrow.